Hi, Stroudsburg and Mountie Nation and students and staff all over Monroe County. I'm really excited to bring another career interview to you guys. Again, a new segment that I just started is kind of, career preparation. And this one's actually the transition from high school into college and then from college into a graduate program is kind of what we're talking about today. So I'm really excited. I have another guest. I know I just interviewed recently my brother-in-law, Benjamin Pembleton. I'm also going to interview Adam Pembleton, who is in my network of people to interview. So we always talk about that, stay within your network, branch out of your network. But Adam and I do share a lot in common. We both have a kinesiology background, which he's going to talk about. And we actually went to the same college. But again, a lot of the people that I've interviewed have kines backgrounds and went to Penn State. But if you actually sit and listen to the interviews, a lot of us have different careers. So one thing, talking through this and thinking through things, just because you have the same major and same degree or undergraduate degree as someone does not mean you're necessarily going to have the same career. So that's something we're going to highlight today. We're also going to just highlight Adam's career journey to where he is now. And we're just going to kind of get the ins and outs of what it is really like to go from a high school setting into a big school like Pennsylvania State University. So without further ado, I really appreciate your time, Adam. Thanks for taking out time of your busy schedule. I know you're working in the summer and you took time to meet with us and present to our students at Stroudsburg and Monroe County, and you are a Stroudsburg graduate. So if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, I know I kind of did a small introduction, but introduce yourself, say what your undergraduate degree is, and then say, where you're going next and your next steps.
Yeah. Thanks, Glenn. So my name's Adam. I am a 2017 graduate from Stroudsburg High School. And then just in May, I graduated from Penn State University with a Bachelor of Science degree in kinesiology in the movement science option, which you kind of like Clint alluded to, was a different option that he took at Penn State, even though it was the same major. And then in August, I am going to be pursuing my Doctor of Chiropractic degree from the University of Bridgeport. So kind of like Clint said, just, starting off here, like just in that major, I had friends doing medical school, physical therapy school, going into health and phys ed, going into public health, going into personal training, going into strength and conditioning, and so much more. There's just from a simple major, there's so much that you can do, and you don't have to feel streamlined just into one career just because you're in a certain major whatsoever.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I know I'm sure things when I graduated from Penn State, it was, 2012 already. So, I'm aging myself almost 10 years now. But I'm sure things have changed dramatically. I know every time I go to Penn State and drive through, it's like, where was this building when I went here? Where was this apartment complex? Where was this statue? Every single time. So it's really cool to see. And I'm glad I was able to kind of live Penn State 4 more years through Adam. I think if you are an alumni of Penn State or are planning on going to Penn State, it's kind of a cult. I'm not going to lie, but it really is. So let's go back, Adam. Let's talk about like in high school. Did you know you wanted to be a kines major? Did you know that you were going to go to chiropractic school? How did you kind of find this niche, and how did you find out like, hey, maybe I'm passionate about, the human body and movement and how I can help people? How did that kind of come about?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I would say like growing up, I would say even going into like 9th, 10th grade, had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I was like, I was doing well in school, and I knew I was a passionate learner, and I loved, doing what I had to do to an extent, obviously, like any high school student does. But I think honestly, it was, just really enjoying like going into biology class or anatomy and physiology class. And then I honestly got lucky and took first aid athletic training my sophomore year, just because I heard it was a cool class. And like I fell in love with, having 2 classes about learning about the human body and learning about treating injuries. I was like, this is amazing. And then, beyond that, just like having, one-off conversations with teachers about what they did, and having teachers. I had a teacher that taught athletic training that was a former athletic trainer when she was in college. And I had teachers and coaches that came from different careers and medical backgrounds from before, and just having those connections and having those second off conversations was extremely helpful. And then obviously having, a couple people close in my circle that were kinesiology majors at Penn State that said, hey, this is probably a pretty good track for you. because honestly, I was going to go in with a pre-med track. And I kind of ended up just, going off and saying, hey, maybe I'll try this kinesiology thing, and ended up absolutely loving it. Even though that wasn't, the case for a lot of people in my major. And that's totally okay, because really you just have so much time in your freshman and even your sophomore and sometimes your junior year in college to really find exactly what you want to do. If I had to do it again, I wouldn't count on getting so lucky, getting my, major correct on the first choice, but I did. And I wouldn't change a thing going back about being a kines major whatsoever.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you really like put it into perspective there at the end. I think a lot of times our students kind of get, really, it's a good thing to have your career mapped out, but you have to understand that it's ever changing. Just because Adam's going in to be a chiropractor doesn't mean that, virtual chiropractic might be around when you graduate. There's so many opportunities and options that my career that I'm sitting in the seat right now was not a job when I graduated college. It wasn't a job until 18 months ago when I took the position. Stroudsburg and about 30 to 50 other school districts in Pennsylvania hired positions similar to mine. So it's something that as a student, yes, figure out what you're interested in, but you don't have to plan your career. Definitely have some interest, plan what you enjoy, but you don't have to necessarily say, this is what I'm going to do. And, if you change your major, don't freak out. It's okay. It happens. But with that being said, try to do it within the first couple of years when you're taking your gen ed, so you're not, behind the 8 ball for things like that.
If I can
Yeah.
add something there, what I'll even say is like the number one thing that like I saw from me and some of my college classmates that was huge is like take classes in college that you like. Don't be a major because you kind of see the end goal of this occupation that you're going to love. Don't suffer through 4 years of college just because you want to get to that end goal. If you don't like the classes that you're taking, there's a very good chance you're not going to like the degree that, or the occupation that you're going to get into. And that's kind of what really solidified my, comfort in this kind of path, was that I was like, I love learning about biology. I love learning about anatomy and physiology. I've tolerated chemistry for a couple of years, like I'm ready to kind of make that next jump into some of these more difficult graduate courses. But I had friends that are kind of like, oh, like I can't stand biology. I can't stand learning about anatomy. And I'm like, well, this is going to be the rest of your life. Why are you, this isn't, don't just do it. You're clearly not doing it for yourself. So that's what I'll say. Just do it for yourself and make sure that you're liking what you're doing, because that'll just make it so much easier.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's something I never even thought about. It was kind of, I wish I would have thought more about that when I was in college, because it was kind of like one of those things where I was like, well, kines sounds like something I'm interested in. And, being a teacher is something I saw in high school. I was like, oh, I might be able to be a phys ed teacher. And I kind of put my head down and grinded through it. And now I love it. I love that career. And I got really lucky to be where I'm at today. But yeah, that's a really good point. If you're not enjoying what you're doing at college and those classes, you probably want to figure out a career where you are enjoying those classes. Like you said, you are going to have classes that you're, not particularly enjoying, like organic chemistry and things like that, but you kind of just have to push through those classes. But at the end of the day, if you're not enjoying most of your workload at college, you might want to reevaluate what you're learning about. That's a really good point, Adam. I appreciate that. So let's talk about back in high school again and traveling through. What are some jobs that you've taken and that might have helped you like decide, well, I like this part of this job, so maybe I'll like this career, or I hated this part of this job, so I know I don't want to do that. I know you've had a couple like side jobs to make some money, and I know you're working right now. So anything that you've gathered from the careers or jobs that you've taken on that have kind of helped you and be like, oh, well, I think maybe chiropractic work is really what I want to do. And if I'm remembering correctly, you might have been able to do an internship as well. So if you could speak upon that.
Yeah. I mean, I'll start in high school. I worked at a car wash for multiple years, and it was, I mean, it's a job for money, like straight up. It wasn't my favorite thing in the world to do, but it's something that was great for a couple of years in high school. But I definitely learned that I loved kind of like, as I, was older in high school and was, with a ton of younger high school students that were also working there, I really learned that I loved like, obviously like I was the same title as them, as, you know, car wash attendant or whatever we were saying, but I loved being able to, you know, be a mentor to them and try to teach them, you know, how to be like the best employee and kind of learn the ropes of the company and all of that. And I think that kind of went on to me saying like, oh, like I would love to be able to, you know, work as a doctor and have people in my, you know, clinic or whatever that I'm able to kind of help them reach their full potential and be able to help patients as much as possible, and that kind of thing. And then I did 2 internships in college that were huge. My first one was I was working in a chiropractor's office, kind of as a assistant, you know, office manager type thing, where basically I was just interacting directly with patients, doing electrical stimulation and ultrasound treatments, working them through stretches, just welcoming them into the facility, that kind of general stuff. And that was amazing. You know, it was like that opportunity, I will always say, and I'll thank the doctor that gave me that opportunity forever, that's what solidified me, that I was like, I for sure want to do this. And that was something that I was totally nervous about going into it, that I was like, what if I hate this and I have to, you know, change everything up? And it just was so reassuring that I loved it. And then I did another virtual internship this past fall, where I was writing blogs for an online contributor. And that was a great internship as well. I learned a lot about writing, and I learned about, you know, social media interaction and how that, you know, I can even bring that into my career in the future, even though that is something that I would have never thought that I would be doing. It was definitely something that, you know, broadened my scope of, you know, the health and fitness field, and you know, definitely allowed me to look forward and see that how I can contribute in different ways to my profession, even not in like the most simplest ways that I would have seen it before.
Awesome. Yeah. With working in the chiropractic office, were there things that you took away from that where you were like, I really like this aspect, but there's things that I would do definitely differently? You know, I'm just interested. That's not really a question I have. I'm just kind of interested personally, like to kind of get your feedback. Like if our students would go into an internship, you know, and the fact that you were able to do it before you went to chiropractic school and got your degree is a huge thing, because the biggest thing I see that's happening in a lot of areas in a lot of states are students are graduating from college with degrees, but then when they go and work in that degree, they find out that they absolutely hate what they're doing. So just some, you know, like some takeaways that you got from that experience in the chiropractic office. And obviously, I know you would recommend students get an internship if possible, or at least like a day in the life shadow. So yeah, that kind of brings me to my next question. Why don't we just go with, you know, what did that look like? Like, what did a day in the life of that office look like? Like, what was that like for you? What was the hours? What was like, what made you be like, oh, I really like this. You know, I would do things differently. Kind of like if we were a fly on the wall at that office, what would we see?
Yeah. I mean, what I will say first, just going back to your other point, is like, I was super lucky and blessed to get that internship and be able to do that. People, like students in the medical field, there's a million students and there's probably not even close to that many opportunities. But really just doing your due diligence and making sure, like I legitimately was like cold calling offices like, hey, I'm a Penn State student. You guys are close by. Is there any chance you do any sort of internship programs, you know, next fall? And I got really lucky, and they ended up offering me a position. It was awesome. But as far as like the hours and the day in the life thing, I was working there 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I would come in around 6:30. The office would open at 7, so I'd get in at 6:30. You know, sort through some paperwork and patient files and make sure that was all organized for the doctor. I would prep. We had rolling beds in the office where basically patients would hop on, and kind of, it was basically like a simulated foam roll type thing. So I would set those up, clean them off, set up the e-stim machine in one of the back rooms, and just make sure that anything else that needed to be done in the office was done. And then when patients would come in, usually the first patient was around 7 a.m., I would welcome them into the office, you know, help them through any exercises or ailments that they needed before they saw the chiropractor. And then I would kind of lead them in to see the doctor. I would oftentimes sit in with the doctor and watch him, you know, treat a patient directly, whether it was through adjustments or other techniques. So I got to see that kind of directly, which was awesome. And then I would help patients, outside. Really, it was great because I got to literally see a patient from as soon as they stepped in the door until they walked out. And I got to really get to know a lot of these patients over the months that I was working. Another thing that was great about that internship is that I was doing it during the week, like while I was in school. And they were really nice enough to let me, do work just in the hours that I didn't have class. So a lot of the times, I believe it was just on Wednesdays, I would come in the morning from like 7 to noon, and I had class from 12 to 2. And I would go back to campus, go to class, and then come back and then be there from like 3 to 7. So it ended up working out really well. I got a ton of hours that, I needed for grad school. And I had a great time, really solidified my interest in the field.
Awesome. Now, with that internship, is that something that's required for you to graduate and get your undergrad?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for my program and a ton of other programs that I know, at least at Penn State, I had to do 3 internship, or they call them internship opportunities. So I did one my sophomore year of college, which was more of a shadowing opportunity. I did was 15 hours, and I shadowed a phys ed teacher and a doctor of chiropractic. So that was more of a, meet and greet, kind of understand the field, ask them questions and that kind of stuff. And then my second internship was the one I was just talking about in the office. That was around 100, I think 100 hours were required. I did close to 250 hours. That was in the office directly working with patients. And then I technically was supposed to do one more in-person internship during my senior year. But that got canceled. So I had to do a virtual internship because of COVID.
Awesome. And so you were almost pulling like 12-hour days with your shifts with class and everything like that. So so people know, I just want students to understand, like everyone thinks like when you get to college, you have all this down and free time, which sometimes you do. But when you're doing things and you're trying to get yourself above the thousands of other students who are in your classes, working 12-hour days, getting there early and then staying till 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, that's what might be required. So, there are definitely sacrifices that need to be made. So that's definitely good to hear. We kind of touched on this earlier, but, what classes at Stroudsburg really helped you prepare for your future and your career? And what classes or what do you wish would have been offered, maybe in a class or classes that you think would have been helpful, or maybe even classes that you see like, a lot of your friends that went through Penn State that might have struggled, if they would have had X, Y, or Z class, it might have helped them.
Yeah. I mean, just the first thing that came to my head that absolutely blew my mind was the amount of engineers that I had as friends at Penn State that didn't take physics in high school is absolutely insane to me, because that's literally what they did from as soon as they stepped on campus until they got off. They had at least one physics-based class every time. And I ended up taking physics, and it really helped me. But that class is so important if you're going into engineering or anything with the health field. It is crucial because it's so hard in college, and just coming in with a little bit of the background is so helpful. But really, like, honestly, all of those kind of tough science classes really helped me. Physics, chemistry, biology, anatomy and physiology. That's the basis of my program. And that was just going into college with some sort of background. And, I'm not going to lie whatsoever. Like, those classes in high school kind of just touch on a lot of the topics that go on in college, which is definitely what they're designed to do. But literally just having, the first couple steps down for a lot of those classes made my life so much easier in college. It was unbelievable just to be one step ahead of, the student next to me. The other thing I would say is just even if you don't like some of those classes in high school, maybe you're not looking to go into a science-based field. Maybe you're not looking to go into an engineering-based field, but the critical thinking skills that I learned in those classes are so big. And definitely something that I learned, my junior and senior year in college is that a lot of the classes, I took so many chemistry classes. I'm a chiropractor. I'm doing nothing with medicine. I'm doing nothing with drugs. So in every one of those classes, I'd be sitting here, when the heck am I going to use this? You know what I mean? But what I kind of did realize later in college was the critical thinking and, studying habits that you learn from those classes are so important. And whether or not you're actually going to use the information, you're going to learn so much about your studying habits and how to learn and be a better learner. And that's the kind of stuff that you're going to need to use in graduate school, because there's going to be less help and you're taking more classes and it's going to be harder material and you're just going to have to be able to, do it yourself. So even though I didn't necessarily love those classes in high school or college, they taught me so much about myself and so much about like how to study.
Yeah. So when we have students saying, why do I have to take this class? It might just be as simple as you need to learn how to work hard and study hard, so awesome. That's a really good thing. I don't think anyone's mentioned that. And I really appreciate that, because I do like to tie a why to our classes, but I do agree, sometimes it's about working hard and learning how to study really hard, because sometimes it gets tough when you're especially going into a specialized field in graduate school like you're doing. So next question is kind of a tough one, and one that, if you have an answer, great. If you don't, I understand. But like, what recommendations do you have to get our students career ready? Like, what do you think helped you in high school? What do you think helped you in college? And you kind of touched on the critical thinking classes, but also like, what can we be doing at Stroudsburg to help our students get ready for the future and real life, not just high school, but like after high school?
Yeah, I would say like, just looking into college and I'll get to other stuff later, but just looking into college, the like number one thing that I saw with students that struggled in their freshman year of college, and I think every student struggles to an extent in their freshman year of college, but the students that struggled the most, I would say, were smart kids in high school, and they could get by being smart kids. You know what I mean? So they didn't need to put in the extra time to study. They didn't need to, they would be given material in high school and they just got it. And that's fine. They understand material. They could just sit during, the regular school day, understand the material, do their homework in homeroom the next day, and then be done and, put in minimal effort after school. And that's fine. But then when you get to college, and you're in your intro bio class and it's the most material that you've ever seen, and you don't know how to study. There's just literally you have no studying tools. You don't know what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And that kind of stinks. I would also say that kids come into their freshman year of college and think, oh my God, now I have to, study for hours because I don't know this material. These same kids that don't really know how to study. And then, kids are staying, pulling all-nighters in the library until 4 a.m. because they have an exam at 8 a.m. the next day. And what I never understood about that is just, that's not good studying habits. You're not learning anything. You could study for 8 hours, in one sitting overnight, and you're not learning anything. Because sometimes if you had to study in high school and you didn't know something, you could just cram all one night before the exam and you'd be fine. In college, if you're like, I would be so particular about my studying because I wanted to study for the least amount of time that I needed to get the grade that I wanted. So if I could break that up into 30-minute segments, a week leading up to an exam, it adds up to a lot of studying time, but I'm making sure that my studying time is as, calculated as possible. So this 30 minutes, I'm doing this chapter, this 30 minutes, I'm doing this chapter, this 30 minutes, I'm, working on drawing equations or whatever. And by doing that, I was able to just maximize my studying time and making sure it's as effective as possible. And that really helped me. And I learned, as I got more into college, the better ways to study and how to be, the best student that I possibly could be. And I think that just helped me so much because I could really maximize how much studying I was doing and how I was studying correctly. But then also I had a ton of free time because my studying was so calculated and I didn't need to be, staying up until 4 a.m. in the library the day before an exam. As far as like leaving college, I can just touch on like going to graduate school. It's a tough process and it's not fun. I would say it's less fun than the, college admissions process, which is already a tough process. It's stressful and there's a lot that goes on in a very short period of time, and there's different deadlines for every school, and you're worried about exam scores, your grad school exam scores for a lot of these places. But asking for help was just the biggest thing. And I think I did a really bad job of asking for help during that process. But there's a ton of people, whether it's, mentors that you had or internship supervisors or advisors in your college, they're so willing to help and they've gone through it before that just asking them for help and using those resources is probably the best thing that you can do. As far as like real world stuff, I would say just put in the work for a lot of the stuff, whether it's getting internships or, looking at jobs after college or after high school or even after college. It's just put in the work and make sure that the work you're doing makes sense. You can apply to 100 jobs, but if your resume stinks, then you're wasting your time. Like, make sure you're putting in the time to have a good resume. Get a LinkedIn profile that you're making connections with people in your field. Reach out to people in positions that can help you, that can, make connections with other people that are hiring. If you're cold calling people, for 100 jobs, it's going to be tough. But if you're making sure that you are calling people that have connections to your field or have connections to your university or connections to your major, that's the stuff that's going to make, you're going to make meaningful connections and be able to actually, solidify jobs or internships, doing that kind of stuff. Awesome.
Yeah. So basically, taking it away from what you said, be efficient with your time.
Yeah.
If you're gonna apply to 100 jobs, make sure your resume is top notch before you start doing that.
Right.
If you're gonna study for a test for an exam for 8 hours, figure out a way to take that 8 hours and make it productive. Don't just spend 8 hours one day. Space it out. Retain the knowledge, and then 30-minute segments, like you said, retain the knowledge and kind of move on to the next material once you get the first stuff mastered. I really like that. I think that's a really good point. So I guess my next question is I basically have two more for you, Adam. But what skills would you want in a coworker? Like, if you got a job as a chiropractor and you open an office or you were working with someone, what skills would you want, or what personality traits or what traits would you want that person to have? And also, what skills and what traits do you think we should be teaching to our junior high and high school students as they transition into the workforce and into, the military or college or trade school?
I would say, like, number one by far, and I've seen this in high school, like playing sports, in college, doing, some volunteer stuff with Thon. And then even beyond that, if you can be a good communicator, it sets you ahead of everything. It's so big just to be able to talk to another person and tell them what's going on. If there's a problem that arises, you want to be able to immediately be able to go to someone, and whether it's ask for help or ask for advice or just let them know what's going on. That's just so in a workplace, that's what like needs to be happening constantly. And like, when you have someone that's, a problem comes up and then it's days before you know about it as a boss or a leader, that's the most frustrating thing in the world, because it may be something that you could have solved so quickly. I would say another thing is just being a hard worker. I mean, you want someone in your group that's going to be able to put in the time and make sure that they're doing the best work that they can possibly do. I would honestly even say that I would rather someone that is like less talented but can be a more like a harder worker than someone that's more talented that's just going to be a lazy person all day. You need to be talented in whatever you're going to do, but you can absolutely make up for a little bit less talent by being a hard worker. And I would say that no one would disagree with me in saying that. The other thing I would say is like being as personable as possible, especially in like my field. Like, I'm going to be with people and patients every day. And you could be the best chiropractor, you could be the best physical therapist, you could be the best doctor in the world. But if you can't talk to people and make sure that they understand what's going on, that they, know what your treatment plan is going to look like, no one's going to want to come and see you. It doesn't make sense because they're not going to have a good time there. Maybe you make them feel better than they've ever felt, but if they don't enjoy the session that they're coming in and paying their hard-earned money to see you, they're not going to come back. So being able to, and this goes back to communication, being able to communicate with your patients, and even though they might not exactly understand, some of the terminology that you're using, making sure that they understand in whatever, however they can understand it, making sure that they understand it is the biggest thing. And being able to be that personable and friendly and communicate with everyone is such a big thing. And being able to, get those skills at the high school level is just going to set you apart, for college. And then you're going to be on a great track, once you graduate from college.
Awesome. Awesome. So I thought of another question before we go to the last one. You've been through, you graduated from Penn State, you're going to grad school. So you've been through freshman to senior year. What have you noticed between the students who are successful and the students who end up not being super successful at the college level? Like, what are the differences? Like, what skills or what are these people doing that are successful versus the people that, maybe friends or family members or whoever that you see, like, well, they weren't successful at that level. What are they doing differently?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like the big thing that I saw, and I saw it with, a lot of my friends at school that weren't great students, they don't care about their studying. And it seriously isn't, like I was saying before, it's not that they're, it's not about how much time you put into studying, it's doing the best studying that you could possibly do. And, I had friends, like I was saying, that would, they're posting Snapchats like 8 hours in the library. And I'm sort of like, that's not cool. One, like, I'm sleeping, it's way more fun. And you're not doing anything. Like, you're not learning anything by spending those 8 hours in the library. I studied for 15 minutes, before I went to bed. And I guarantee you, I knew more information in that 15 minutes than you did in 2 hours. Just being intentional and making sure you're getting your work done quickly is so important. And kind of like you were alluding to too, I had semesters in college where I was extremely busy with, extracurriculars and doing internships. It was tough. But I also had semesters where, I wanted to hang out with my roommates a ton and I wanted to have a great college experience. And that's awesome. That's what college is for, at some points. And being able to say, especially like during my senior year, all right, I'm just going to study for 30 minutes today. And then I've got the next 2 days where I can, block out these 30-minute sections. Being able to do that, I was able to spend more time with my roommates, have more fun, do a lot of the things that I wanted to do in college and have more free time. Kind of going along with that, like something that I never did in high school that I started doing in college that was huge is being very religious with my calendar. Like, just making sure, like, I knew exactly when I needed to do this. I knew when I wanted to, go for a run or go to the gym or get some studying time in, or blocking out time where I was like, I'm not doing anything. I needed, a break from studying, and that kind of stuff, versus some of the people that I knew in college that didn't do as well. They'd be like, oh, wait, my exam is, in 2 days. I got to start studying today. Like, that's stuff that you just need to have planned out in order to do, as well as you possibly could. Another totally different thing I would say is just, there's so many opportunities in college to take advantage of, whether they're extracurriculars or clubs or, working in a research lab or being a TA. And there's so many opportunities, but no one's going to come to you to give you that opportunity. So being able to, go up to a professor after class and say, hey, I love this class. Can I, is there anything that I can do in the future? Professors love hearing that. And there's a really good chance that you doing that and just making a connection with them could lead to, you being a teaching assistant in the next fall, or you working in their research lab and gaining critical experience in whatever field that may be. Or, gaining some sort of mentor for your next couple of years. And then even looking into, clubs, just taking the next step and trying to be, a leader in an organization. And by all means, I think one of the things that I saw in high school a ton was, and I would say I'm guilty of it myself, is joining things just to put them on your resume. And, it's great to have things in your resume and onto your college application, everything. But one of the biggest things that I noticed, especially in graduate school interviews, is if they ask you about something on your resume, you better be able to talk about it and tell exactly what you did there and why it's beneficial. If you throw some random club on your resume that you went to 3 meetings for in a semester, they're going to they're gonna ask you about it and you're gonna have nothing to say about it, and then they're just gonna brush it off as if it was nothing on your resume. Versus if you were the, president of some club, or you led an organization, or even if you're just a general body member and you're super passionate about that organization, you did a ton of different things, that's what's going to make you stand out. They don't care that you showed up to a couple meetings, in a big lecture hall. They care that you're passionate about something, which I think any employer would be excited about that.
Awesome. Yeah. So sounds like big things I took away from that were organizational skills, time management, extracurricular activities, and then actually going and creating a network, going and actually, like you said, I think you said it best. And, in high school, I feel like we do a good job of like trying to get students to do things. In college, it's you're doing what you want to do. It's not, your professor's not going to pull you out after class and say, hey, I really think you're a great student. Would you like to do this? It's like, no, you got to kind of approach them and say, hey, I love this class. I'm passionate about it. Are there any opportunities? And I think that's one thing that we really need to understand. When you're passionate about something, you find what you love, go after it. Don't hold back, go after it. Organization, time management, like you said, are huge. And that leads me to my last question. And just to summarize everything we talked about, what advice or what piece of advice, if someone is, watching this, or, doesn't have the time to watch the whole thing, but one thing that you want to pass along that you think if they watch the end of this and they say, okay, if I take that one thing away from Adam, that's going to make me more successful for the future. What piece of advice, or, a couple pieces of advice would you give to our younger generation to get them to be successful in the future?
Yeah. I would say just like always have an open mind. I think I met so many people in high school and in college that were so certain that they were going to do something. And I think even from, this interview, it made it seem like this is exactly what I knew that I was going to do, which honestly wasn't the case. There were several times, during my early years in college that I was like, maybe I'll change to a different major. Maybe I'll look at this. But just literally keep an open mind and get as many connections as possible, and get as much knowledge as possible, even if it's something that you don't think that you're interested in. There were so many classes that I took at Penn State that I was like, this will fulfill a gen ed, whatever. It sounds like an easy class, that I ended up loving. And it's stuff that I ended up taking other classes on, or think that I'll use in my career today that I would have never thought. And I think just if you're closed-minded, you are just limiting yourself in the amount of opportunities that you have, and the amount of relationships that you can make. And as cliche as it is, just keeping an open mind, it opens every door for you. You're not limiting yourself to one career path or one opportunity, because there's a good chance that when you get there, you maybe don't like it and you want to change career paths in a couple of years, or you want to, go back to school and try something else, which I think is totally fine. Just by doing that, you're going to have the best time in college. You're going to maximize the amount of opportunities that you have after college. And I think you're just going to have an overall better life, in my opinion.